Our first step is going to be to put a piece of trace over the perspective that we've printed. Here's the perspective we printed from steps 1, 2, and 3. Grab our trace. Right on there. Bring that down a little. This is the layout step, and the layout step is seemingly simple, but it's probably one of the most important ones you're going to do. I notice it's dark down there, so the first thing I'm going to do is figure out where that lake is. There it is. Alright, so I've got a lake right there. The trees I can kind of figure out in the driveway I can see, but the lake was pretty dark, so. Get that tape down, and away we go. Okay, I'm going to want to establish some borders for my drawing. Roughly bring out a quick pointer. When you taped it down, probably want to line up that middle line with your triangle. So when you do the verticals, if you'll notice as you go further away from the middle, the verticals start to change a little. That's not a problem. You're just going to have to, if you get far out, you'll have to kind of pick the middle of the line. You'll see. Okay, there's going to be the sides. I'm going to do the bottom of my perspective here. When you're doing the perspectives, less foreground is usually your friend. And I'm going to make my sky go probably about here. And a similar distance, not exactly the same, over here. And I'm going to make it a little higher than what I got in the SketchUp drawing. Let's put the sky up there, just in case we have a background stripe. This is the horizon line right here. Thing about the horizon line, before I do the background stripe, if I were to take any walls going in this direction and carefully bring them back, all these lines go right back to that's known as the right vanishing point. If I took all these lines and brought them back, and these lines are going to go right off my drawing. And I'm going to mark up my board, but I'll erase it after. They may or may not intersect on the board. Let's see. Oh yeah, well, it's actually a little bit off the board. That's my left vanishing point. That's my right vanishing point. And you'll notice that's why it's called a two-point perspective, that all these things go back to here. Where that's important for you, if you'll notice, all the window heads go back to that. These window heads all go back to the left vanishing point. These window heads all go back to the right vanishing point. So when you're sketching, if you're drawing in window heads or elements or doors or anything like that, be thinking about where those vanishing points are, and you can figure it out by just tracing them back to the horizon line. All right. Now I'm gonna, since we've established in SketchUp that's your horizon line, you can see it. So I'm just gonna put a mountain like that. Now, if you were way up in the air for this, in this perspective, I'm probably about, I don't know, 20 feet in the air, 18 feet in the air. You can tell how high you are if you see where the horizon line lines up with the building, and it's about right there, and we knew this was 5, 10, 15, so that's probably about 12 feet up in the air. If you're way up in the air, if you are doing a bird's eye view perspective, then the horizon line might be way up here, at which point I will sometimes bring my sky stripe down a little bit, not much, but a little bit, to spare me of having to render a whole bunch of background. And I'm going to start putting in some trees now. There's a big tree right there. I want to bring it out and over my borders. I got a pretty good sized one right there. Got a big one up front here. I'm not going to draw that one. I got a big one here that's going to go way off the page, so I'm going to keep those out, but I do have a couple here. And that's probably going to cover up most of that one behind it. There was the lake. We've got that little cluster of the planting element here. And I'm going to make those a little smaller. For now, they're just blobs, obviously. We'll put a little more detail in those later. Okay. Now I've got a lot of the foreground trees. I got a couple in there too. And I'm going to have a bunch behind the lake, and I'm going to draw them up to, we're going to assume those are mature trees. I'm just kind of doing a background around the lake. And as you'll see, what's going to happen when I get my trees in, I'm pretty much going to lose my background stripe. That's okay. That's not a problem. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple elements in that I didn't sketch in SketchUp. If you were doing this with doing a lot of sketching and not having put a lot of information in your SketchUp drawing, now would be the time to put your windows and doors in if you just had the masses. I went through and put all the windows and doors in SketchUp. It just makes it a little easier for me later on to trace it. But the first thing I'm going to do is, just to remind me, I'm going to go ahead and put my trim in here. And I'll show you why in a second. I like to put my roof trim in early. We'll do the same on the garage. Now, a lot of the garage you're not going to even see, but what we do see, we'd like to get right. And we'll have a little bit of trim here. I drew the trim above the intersection there. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw the trim a little on the outside of the wall. This one I'm going to put about where it is. And I'll show you why in a second. Okay, I'm also going to bring the wall in a little bit. I'm going to cheat it in. See that right there? That shows me that I have a roof overhang. And you're going to want to do that on the front too. Okay, let's do it like, I'll make it a little bit bigger maybe. A little bit bigger. Here I'm going to go back to my right vanishing point. And it's close on those lines. Tough to see them. Sometimes you'll lose a couple lines in your trace. I'd rather not be figuring this out when I'm doing it in ink. So I'm going to do it in pencil. So if I have to make any adjustments later on, I can fix it. Same thing. And now I'm going to bring those walls in just a little bit. But see, I've got that overhang. This one, it's right at the corner, so you don't really have to do much with it. You can pretty much just line it up. This one's going to be pretty minor also. And the garage, same thing. And back here, well, we got the tree there, but we'll put it in there just in case. And see where it's got that jog? You need that to show that you do have an overhang on your roof. I'm going to start putting a little more detail in the chimney. If you remember the chimney, wasn't just a rectangle up into the sky. Now again, I could have drawn that in SketchUp and spared myself this part, but we just want to hint that the chimney's got a few things going on other than just straight lines. So yeah, it's just a hint, but that'll help when you do your profile. It's some of these subtle things that make a big difference. Right now, with that right there, I've got my trees in, I've got the building in. Now I can put my final piece of trace over, and you see that didn't take a great deal of time, but that's an important step. Now I know what my sky, where my sky goes, I know where my background goes. Oh, and there's one thing that I did forget. What I like to do, here's our driveway. Whoops. I like to shoot that out a little bit from the border. I'm going to do that with this, because my border was straight. This has to be a little bit. I don't know how well that's going to show up in the video. But much like I had the trees hanging out over the border, I stick that driveway out a little over the border too, to kind of draw your eye into the perspective. We've got a fresh piece of trace. Now, if you're using a scanner, you want to make sure that your drawing fits within your 8.5 by 11 paper. So when you go to scan it, it will fit on your scanner. If you're taking a picture of it with your phone, because you don't have a scanner, then that's not quite as critical. And by the way, a scanner will be a much better way to go than taking a picture with your phone, but they will both work. Take my final piece of trace down. And I'm getting ready to ink now. I'm going to start with my thin Sharpie, hopefully. Oh, she looks tired. She's got some ink in her. Okay, so I'm going to start by, I'm going to start inking in some of these trees just because there's a lot of them going on, and I want to make sure that I've got them in the right place and that I don't draw over them later on. Again, I'm using my reverse umbrella stroke, and we'll fluff these up a little later on, but for now I want to just get those basic lines in. Now you'll notice, again, trying to stay on that page. You'll notice I didn't start the tree right at the center of this tree. I try to avoid that. It looks just a little weird. I got those three big ones in there. I'm going to try and remember which ones are in the front here. These are just little fellas. Little trees always go quicker than big trees. Now, normally I would be doing this at 11 by 17, which would allow me to put a lot more detail in these drawings. But in this case, because of the situation, I'm going to assume that most of you don't have an 11 by 17 scanner available to you. So if you had a scanner, it's probably 8.5 by 11. We're going to do a little smaller. The good news is that will make it go quicker. The bad news is it gets tough to get some of the details in there. So you're going to have to be kind of careful with your pen. Okay, I've got all the major trees in. Now I'm going to start blocking out the house, and then I'll come back in and put in some of my curvilinear lines and things like that. So I'm going to start at the top of the house. And here we go. I'm hoping that I'm not blocking out the drawing with my head. Get those lines in on the chin there. Now, when I'm tracing my perspective, I tend to do all my angled lines first, and there's a lot of angled lines here. And then I'll do my vertical lines later. Sometimes you just can't quite see it through that trace, but we'll be all right. Put it right there. That should be about like that. That'll work. Now, when I'm doing these lines, always trying to pay attention to whether or not they appear to go back to the same vanishing point. Whether this one's going to this vanishing point and these lines are going to that vanishing point. Try and really look at them and see if they are. In the case of your right vanishing point, you can actually see it when you put it in there. Okay, I'm now going to put my circles in. I'll try and see them. That looks to be one right there. I'm just going to go gentle with it. Just putting one line. Again, this is at a pretty small scale, so these are going to be tiny to draw. I'm going to work my way down the drawing. I'll do my window heads. If you'll notice that the window heads all line up. So you can set your triangle once and just walk right around them. This one's going to be a little different because it's on a different plane. That one's pretty much hidden. That one's there. If I remember correctly, we had another window over here. I'm going to try and get that back to that vanishing point. You can barely see it. We've got the windows in the garage. We've got the bottom. Now, with the garage, I'm going to do something a little different. I'll go ahead and put that line in there so I know where it is. Okay, with the garage, I want to make sure. Now, here when I'm doing this line, I put my pen down and I spin it, and see how the triangle lines up with the lines of the stairs? That means it's going to the same vanishing point. I'm going to take this and I'm going to step it in just a little bit, like that. And that's going to hint at the fact that there's a step back, that the garage door isn't exactly flush with the outside face. Again, these are subtle little touches, but you need to put them in because that's the way the building's really going to look. Do the same thing at the front door. Notice, and it's not even much more than the thickness of a pen, but it will make a difference. I just did the front steps. Gonna hint at these back ones. Do the bottom of the house. A lot of it's going to be covered in trees. Front of the steps. All right, now I want to do that circle for the patio, our front entry walk, and I'm just going to go real easy on it because some of those lines are real light. We had our walkway. Now you'll notice, because I'm not way up in the sky, that a lot of the ground stuff gets very flat, and the lines are close together. That's okay. Here I've got a curve, so I'm going to do my curve first. That's on my driveway. Okay, that's going to then go straight out. I'm going to line it up with this. And the rest is hidden behind a tree. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put my borders in. Or try to, if my pen will cooperate. Okay, now I've got that framed out. Now I'm going to start putting some of my vertical lines in, and this usually goes pretty quick. And when you do it, you'll start noticing lines that you missed. That's okay, now's the time to go back and do it. Hidden behind the tree. Now I'm just doing my windows. I've got a little bit of it there, not much. Vertical line there. Vertical line there. I forgot to do the chimney. Front door. You can get the bottom line of that window in. It's all right. Now's as good a time as any. Now for my stairs, I'm just gonna, I forgot these lines. And I'm just getting kind of close with the stairs. I don't get super worked up over that. And you put some verticals in, and it looks like stairs. Got the major elements of my building done now. Switch over into freehand mode. I'm going to start to put a little of the lake in there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do my double lines here. Remember, wherever the hard meets the soft. Notice I didn't do a double line outside of the border on my driveway. mulch bed there. Okay, now I'm going to go and I'm going to start adding some double lines to my windows and doors. These are going to be very tiny. I'm not even going to bother doing it on the round windows because it's so small at this scale. Sorry, I forgot a chimney line here. It's so small at this scale that I think you're just going to make a mess with it. I would just leave at this scale those lines as single lines. I'm going to put verticals there that I forgot. Verticals there. Okay, see that overhang? Right there, important. Okay, now I'm gonna just hint at some double lines around the outside of these windows. I'm putting trim in now. And again, the scale on this is so tiny that we're just putting, don't hesitate to break this up a little, and you want to be fairly close with this or the trim's going to look like it's 6 feet wide. Okay, I put in my vertical trim. Now I'm going to put in my horizontal trim. All this, of course, goes back to a vanishing point. This one I might even bring it in just because it'll that trim piece is going to go all the way down. We're going to call that pretty much good the way it is. Alright, next step, besides filling in missing lines, I'm going to put a little bit of detail in those windows. I'm going to put my mullion in, which is going to be a double line. Do the same thing here, midway through. Okay, I've got that trim. So now I've got all the trim in. I'm going to start to put some of the grids in the windows. Now, again, don't hesitate to go real light here. Just some broken, just kind of hint at these. And our reason for doing that is, again, at this scale, see what I'm doing? I'm just doing a little broken line there. Because I'm just trying to hint at these. I start at the top and then I kind of let them feather down. The problem is if I made them solid straight lines and didn't do the broken line like I'm doing now, they're going to look, it's just going to be so strong. I mean, it's quite a bit of grids in there now. It's a small scale drawing. I forgot to put mullions in that window, that guy, and then I'm going to put my, just hint at it here and here, here, maybe a little bit there and a little bit there. And that's about all I do for mullions. I just keep it kind of light. Next, I'm going to start thinking about shadows and profiles. So I'm going to go ahead and put some of my shadows in. Big strong shadow underneath the, but notice it stops before the end, although with the profile you're not going to notice much of that. In this case, you're going to see more of this back one than the front one, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a pretty heavy shadow there, and then I'm just going to try and go as light as I can for these window shadows with my Sharpie. And with the perspective, much like the elevation, we're not going to show any shadows on the trees. Just hint at those. Oh, I forgot one on top of the door. I'm going to have some kind of a shadow here on the chimney. Got a shadow here. I'm going to try not to smear that. This one, the heavy shadow is going to be on this side. There's that. And one here. Okay, we've done the overhangs. Now the shadows are just about done. We're going to move on to the profile line. The profile line is just going to go around the perimeter of the building. Notice how carefully I'm setting my triangle there so I don't smear this. Let that sit for a minute. I'm going to go back and work on this area where it might be dry. Just the perimeter. Just doing the outline. My Sharpies are all pretty tired, so they're kind of fat. A new Sharpie, you might be able to get a thinner line with that. Okay, that looks good for shadows. Now what I want to do is I'm going to put some character in. Oh, I'm going to hint at some trim on these round windows. So I'm just going to do a little bit. I'm almost stippling it in. And that's okay. Might not even put it all on this one. And for shadows, I'm going to use my thin Sharpie and just put a little hint of a shadow on the window. And that's it. I don't want to do any more because it gets weird. Okay, now I want to separate I'm gonna double line profile some stuff, and you'll see what I mean by that. I want to make this pop out a little, and I want to emphasize that line between the shed, the garage, and the house. So in order to do that, I'm not going to use my fat Sharpie because that's just going to be too strong. So I'm just going to use my thin Sharpie and just go around these elements. And that's going to bring them out a little bit. This one, it's almost like trim there. Okay, I'm done with that. So we've got the profile, we've got the shadows, we've got the bulk trees. Now we're just going to go through and add some freehand character and some texture. So let's start by getting in a little bit of, we're going to do some trunks on those trees. Keep them tiny. Get some back there. Make those fairly small. All right, I'm gonna put some loose leaves and a few holes in these trees. Just to kind of make them not look quite so bland and not look like big old blobs. Always good to throw a few leaves out and about, just to loosen things up. I tend to want to put some bottoms on those trunks. You see what I'm doing with the bottom. It's just so they don't look like they're floating in air. Okay, for character on the building, I am going to put a few lines on my roof. I'm going to start at the halfway point. Try and make sure it doesn't go like that or like that. You're going between these two, so it ought to try and be close to between those two. Go halfway there. I'm a little off on that one. Hopefully by the time we're done, it'll straighten out. We're going to do half of the half. Half of the half again. Half of this one. And then I'm just going to cut this one completely in half. So we got some character lines in our roof. I'm going to do this little roof, try and go back to that vanishing point. there, do the garage. Now when you're doing your character lines and your texture, it won't take much at this scale, just a couple of lines to hint at clapboard. And I'm going to put a double line around that, by the way, to make that roof pop a little bit. Just kind of like my own little thin profile line. I'll do the same on this one, just to bring that out a little bit. Again, go sparing on the texture, because the drawing is just so small. That it will be easily overwhelmed. Just hint it a little bit here and there for the clapboards. Doesn't take much. All these also go back to the vanishing point. So what we're going to do, there's that. And you'll see I'm just putting hints of it where I've got big white spaces. Oh, I got a big white space there. Make sure I go back to it. Okay, and that's about it for character lines on the building itself. I want to pop out this chimney just a little bit with a double line. And I'm going to hint at some bricks up top. And here we go. Just a little bit. And that's going to be about it for that. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get some ground texture in. I'm going to put little hints of my little pavement circles, a little bit of stipple. It doesn't take much. I'm going to do a little here. Clump there. There are some grid lines on this sidewalk, so I'll go ahead and put a couple of those in. Going back to that vanishing point for these. Okay, last thing I would do is put in some grass. So I'm just going to kind of and I'm kind of going back to this vanishing point. I'm not going 100% accurate, but just in the general direction with my okay, and there's my grass. This space looks a little dead in here, so I might go ahead and just put some leaves and Just I don't have a problem with maybe at the corners, just kind of hinting at a little bit of grass or some type of vegetation. Using that stupid upside down umbrella stroke all the time. I'm not going to do anything there because that's my lake, but I don't mind putting a whole bunch of vegetation back there, kind of like on the edge of the lake. I'm just kind of filling that in. Let's throw a couple more leaves on the trees, and we will be almost done. Put a couple holes in these guys. Just okay, I am going to call that one. Oh, almost. I did forget to hint at some shadows on the side of my door, my garage door. So we're just going to put a... See, I didn't even make a solid line. I just started and then I dotted it, which you'll see I did throughout most of the thing. We're going to call this one pretty much done. I don't have a white piece of paper handy to slide under this, but if you want to see what it looks like, there we go. And then having done that, my next step will be to scan it and get it ready to bring into the computer. As I said in the on your assignment, you'll see in the handout, it tells you to do that. That's going to be it for this one, and there will be more videos to follow.